Hello everybody, my name's Novi and welcome back to the channel. If there's one thing we know about pro wrestlers, it's that they're chronically online. Plenty of people suggest otherwise, but we see time and time again that they see what people are saying and use it in their work, for better or worse. Which begs the question, is wrestlers being chronically online a good thing, or is it always just for the worst? Today, we'll dive into all of that and more, but first, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel down below for live streams every Wednesday before Dynamite, and new videos like this every single Saturday, just talking graps. To start, I think we should use a great, very recent example of a wrestler using online discourse to fuel their work, Chris Jericho. Jericho has been getting a lot of hate online for a while now, just for, existing. It's gotten to the point where plenty of fans online have suggested that he and his band Fozzy take a trip down to Antarctica and play a few shows just to kind of get him off TV for a while, and honestly, I get it. Because of that, of course Jericho, a well-known Twitter user, used it to justify a heel turn. To me, it seems like he knows that as a heel, he can turn the online and in-person heat that he's gotten recently into a good thing because he's working for it now. Whether or not the character sucks is up for debate, but it's clear he saw the online discourse and decided to do the only thing that would keep him on TV while also kind of acknowledging it all, which kind of relates back to something MJF did in 2023 when he blatantly acknowledged fans' criticisms online and apologized for it, no less. So if you needed any more proof that wrestlers see this stuff online and adjust to it accordingly, the world champion of a major promotion just acknowledged it and said sorry. I think that's good enough. What's funny is actually something I mentioned in the intro where people suggest otherwise and they think like wrestlers don't care about that Twitter stuff, it's all online. Which yes, it is online, but I think we've seen countless examples of a wrestler's popularity or heat online transferring to real life real fast. Which begs the question, can a wrestler being more online help them get more over? In my opinion, I think that it can, but it's a very fine line that they have to walk. Drew McIntyre, for example, is a guy who's always been popular and loved by the vast majority of wrestling fans, but he's never been more over online than he is right now, simply because he's funny as hell. My favorite bit of his was when he scheduled a tweet that said bored at work to go out during his match with Seth Weekend at WrestleMania, then replied fuck when he got cashed in on. Like, the guy's pretty much a troll, a meme page, a shit poster, all rolled together to serve one purpose, to gas up his feud with CM Punk. And honestly, it's worked, because I think that's the hottest feud in the entire company right now. And I think that's due to Drew feeding into the online discourse about Punk in his segments and in his promos. Also, him doing that isn't just getting him over online, I think he's more over than he ever has been in person as well. It pretty much comes down to, like I said, it's a fine line, and this is something that could very easily be cringe, but they've managed to keep it pretty enjoyable and fun. Another person who I think has walked that line really well is Daniel Garcia. In Drew's case, I think he's funny in a company-friendly kind of way, which is fine and still enjoyable, but DG is funny in a real, authentic way that I think makes him stand out from all the rest. Honestly, I'm realizing that being funny is a really easy way to turn being more online into genuine support, but it's not just that for Danny, I swear. What I think he's done, to an extent that I don't think anybody else has, is that he's tapped into the culture. Specifically the youth of today's culture that I think makes it really easy to connect with him as a younger fan. There's a lot of wrestlers today that would have no idea what any of the brain rot slang we use is, or would even know who Miles is, but Daniel Garcia does. I'd say that mostly comes down to him, being the youth. He's only 25 years old. But I think the best part is just that he's true and authentic to the kind of funny shit that he likes, and I think a lot of people my age really kind of connect with that. He's turned a lot of this younger generation into fans of his, and I think they're probably going to stand by him for the rest of his career. I think the point about authenticity can also be made about Mariah May, who is probably the most chronically online wrestler in the game right now, in a good way. Just like Danny, I think she stays true to herself more so than anything else, just in a very different way than him. She posts plenty of funny shit too, of course, but she's made herself the face of #HotGirlGraps. And has embraced sexuality in a way that I think has only benefited her. For me, I think I've made this point pretty clear, but I think being true to yourself is best. And if embracing sexuality as part of your brand is who you are or who you want to be, I think that's great. Sure, it definitely does bring in the occasional weirdo gooner, but for the most part, I think people just tend to have fun with it all. I also want to say that if Mariah and any other woman in wrestling chooses to express themselves that way, they should be able to do it without having people disrespect and harass her, like what happened with Sky Blue the other day. Women's wrestlers simply just shouldn't have to deal with that kind of shit just because they choose to embrace sexuality in their work. This is a wider conversation to be had another time about some of the weirdos in the IWC. That would include some of those Rhea Ripley fans, which are their own beast, but I really wanted to mention it when talking about this stuff, especially given recent events. It's pretty simple. Just treat women with respect and don't be creepy fucking losers who shout at them in the crowd like they're some fucking weird object. Like, don't be a fucking loser. It's really not that hard. But back to Mariah, I remember her completely taking over Twitter just because she asked fans what kind of first date they would take her on. I remember her replying to so many people that night, which is something she still does a lot to this day. If we're being honest, I think we all know that she's a vanity searcher. I mean, we've all gotten that like from Mariah May if we've ever tweeted about her, which isn't always a bad thing, especially in her case where it definitely isn't. I'd say that's mostly because she only gives attention to the people who actually want to support her and pro wrestling as a whole, the kind of people who actually operate in good faith and just enjoy this whole wrestling thing, which I think is an important distinction to make because it's the opposite of what these next few wrestlers I'm gonna name do or have done. I said earlier, it's a fine line to walk when it comes to getting yourself more over from being more online, and in Dax Harwood's case, he fell off of it. In my assessment, the biggest thing that tipped him over was that he started interacting with the Cornet freaks who are just gross in general. What it really came down to, though, was that he continued feeding into them for an extended period of time, giving them all the attention that they wanted. And when that happens, it just gives them all the ammo to send off their awful takes and ultimately probably grow because they find more people just like them. I specifically remember back in Dax's podcast days that he would continuously start discourse with these kind of people online, mostly with things that he said or tweeted because he just couldn't stop saying things or tweeting things. Nowadays, he's slowed down quite a bit. I think he realized the error that he made, but back then it was a lot. Of course, in time, that led to so many people getting annoyed as well, because at the end of the day, when you're interacting and replying to freaks that smell like shit, you start to come off as a freak who smells like shit. It's like I said though, Dax doesn't really do this thing too much. He doesn't have to worry about smelling too much like shit, because there's a new guy who really does smell like shit, Max Caster. When people started to get really tired of the Acclaimed as an act, they were very vocal about it on Twitter. And I think that clearly got to Caster in one way or another because he started doing the old famous classic trolling the marks gimmick on Twitter and the TV. Look, him doing it on Twitter is one thing, but doing it on TV is just another level of stinky. What makes it even worse though is that I think everyone is aware that that doesn't actually get anyone over, it just kind of appeals to the worst kind of fans. I said earlier that being funny is an easy way to turn being more online into more support, but it's also an easy way to turn it into more hatred, which is exactly what Max has done because absolutely nothing he does on Twitter is actually funny. The only people who ever really chuckle at his shtick are the insufferable pricks in everybody's replies that are always looking for the gotcha owns on everything. The kind of people who never pass up the opportunity to call someone, while misusing the term very regularly, a mark. I do want to be clear though, the disdain for Caster didn't just come from his Twitter antics. It was that, in combination with the Acclaim feeling dead as an act, that combined to build some real resentment for his presence online. For my money, Max Caster's Twitter is the perfect example of what not to do as a wrestler online, because nobody wants to associate with a wrestler who feeds into the worst kind of fans that are probably the most annoying. I mean, it's really just that simple. Given all of that, what's the moral of the story here? Well, basically, the vast majority of people's favorites are chronically online. Whether we find out from them mentioning it in a promo or just blatantly addressing it on Instagram stories, I don't really think it's up for debate. It's insane I haven't mentioned it yet, honestly, but The Rock was mentioning all of the discourse in those 20-minute Twitter promos leading to WrestleMania, and he's The Rock. There's no greater evidence than wrestlers being online than a guy that famous responding to IWC discourse. In his case, and the others I mentioned throughout this video, it can do a lot to build hype, connect with fans, or just make the TV shows more interesting. Then there's the flip side where wrestlers get in too deep with people they shouldn't and they end up worse off for it. So ultimately, this might be a little disappointing, but there's not an answer whether it's good or bad. I think it can be both. I think we have to analyze it on a case-by-case basis. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. I'll say it one more time for the road. It's a fine line that needs to be walked carefully. If you can walk it, it can do a lot of great things for your career in the short term and the long term and just building that fan base. But if you fall, it can lead to so many people begging for you to get off their TV screens. Some know how to do it and some don't. That's kind of just where it comes down to. But I've given my takes, and now I just want to ask all of you watching, where do you stand on it? Does being more online help or hurt wrestlers more often? Let me know down in the comments below, because I genuinely think this is an interesting discussion to be had, and I think there's a lot of valid arguments for both sides. Don't go too crazy down there, but while you are down there, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't for new videos just like these every Saturday, talking graps. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. As always, it's been Novi, much love, peace.